If you seek to shape the future, listen to those who design it. Welcome to If You Seek by Useberry, where expert voices guide us to UX wisdom. Leshikover here, your host of the journey of If You Seek. If you are seeking a different way to learn and understand users, this is the podcast for you. Maybe you are questioning, why If You Seek? Picture as an open door to curiosity. In every episode, we will strive to explore and gain deep insights from experts shaping their domains. We want you to feel enlightened, educated, or even inspired after each episode. The idea is to foster connections within the UX industry. Now, an important information for you. Uncover the secrets of your website with Useberry usability testing. Pinpoint issues, explore user perspectives, and make decisions backed by data. Your website optimal performance starts with Useberry. Dive into useberry.com, join us on social, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your journey to enhance user experience begins now. Today, we are thrilled to have David Standen in the podcast, a product design leader known for his customer-centric approach and hands-on expertise. With a rich background in product and design that include time at Shopify, eBay, Nokia, founding startups, and advising early-stage ventures, David brings a wealth of experience to the table. David knows that successful innovation relies on deep customer insight. He prioritizes objective feedback over subjective preferences, using feedback as a tool for data-driven design decisions. Get ready for a podcast that will help you to talk in the same language as your stakeholders in this episode of Decoding Conversion Insights. Let's start with the show. Hi everybody, my name is Leishi Cubelo. I'm your host of If You Seek. Here's another episode, and this time I have the amazing opportunity to be recording with David Standen. Hi David.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing amazing. How about you? I'm recording from the beautiful island in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico. Where are you from?
I'm based in London. We've just survived a severe hailstorm randomly. But yeah, it's great to be part of the podcast. So yeah, thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you so much for saying yes and sharing your knowledge with the audience. I'm super excited to have another colleague from London, so far away.
Yeah, but you've got much better weather. I wish I was where you are.
That's what people said, but to be honest, today's a rainy day here in the Iceland.
Oh no.
It's a really, really rainy day. Yeah, so happy to learn from you in this episode of Decoding Conversion Insights. Are you ready to share some of your insights?
Yeah, happy to dive in. Yeah, let's see if I can share some of my learnings from my experience, and let's go.
So I remember when I started in my career as a UX designer, and I know that a lot of UX designers and researchers needs to be really focused on numbers when they do it, where they are doing testing. Needs to be really focused on the metrics, percentage, even from 1 to 5%. I know that for some people sounds like so minimal, but for us in a testing, it's so much, right? And
yeah, it can make such a difference. Yeah,
it can make such a difference. And when you're doing an A/B test, it could be like a battle.
Yeah.
So taking into consideration metrics, what metrics do you typically track to measure the success of a conversion optimization rates?
Yeah, it's a great topic, and one hopefully we can kind of unpick through the show. But I think one of the first things to really focus on is clearly the number of users that are actually able to complete the journey, so the actual conversion rate. But I think it's more important to kind of dive a little bit deeper and kind of go through the acquisition funnel and really see what areas indicate any friction or frustration. That's kind of known as like the drop off rates, and it helps you dive a little bit deeper into the experience and kind of uncover a little bit more. But I think it's also important to look at even kind of the time users spend during a single session. It's a good indicator to know whether are they understanding things enough? Are they finding it maybe more complex than what they should? And that's known as like the average session duration. But I think from a UX perspective, I think user engagement's kind of critical. I think you need to be able to leverage, heat maps to understand the effectiveness of your experience and understand where people are actually clicking. I think, they're beautiful things to look at, but if you can interpret them in the right way, I think they're really, really powerful. And I think also the number of people that, are actually completing a task. So when you're setting up your tests for, maybe task-based tests, it's important to know who is completing them and who isn't. And you can even go as far as calculating maybe kind of a score to help you understand the impact of maybe before your improvement and after. And so leveraging almost like a usability score can kind of help you get a bit more insight in terms of how good your work is or how bad it is, right? It doesn't always go to plan.
Thank you so much for that amazing actually answer. I definitely agree with you. I remember when I do a lot of testing on different kind of companies, and the majority of the times they actually measure bounce rate, they measure like heat maps and understand like user interactions. And one of the things that I really love is when you can actually record the behavior and you can understand what are the things that confuse users. I remember one time that it was me and my coworker really having almost like a fight about an element. It was like, no, I don't think people will actually feel that this is clickable and will be visible to the user. And he was like, no, forget about it. People will actually get it. And after a couple of recordings, we noticed actually the actual behavior, and either him or me has the actual answer about it.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes you just can't explain it, right? Things just don't go sometimes the way you think. I think that's also the beauty of running these tests, right? You can be pleasantly surprised sometimes, which is great. I think it's
that
nice
is the
to
magic.
complete things. Yeah, that is the magic. Yeah, it's being able to kind of remove. Yeah, I think any form of I think emotional attachment you've got to the work and say like, wow, that was completely blown my mind.
Definitely, definitely. Can you
Yeah.
discuss the process of you following basically the design and implementing conversion experiments?
Yeah, so I think there's in terms of like the process that you actually flow, I think it's really, really important to, before you get set up, make sure you're focusing in the right area. So I think do lots of early research and analysis just to understand um, I think the potential of the improvement that you want to make. That's just going to help you really hone in and focus your conversations around the area. I think also you need to be able to kind of, I think, have a dialogue with your team, right? Your team's going to be made up of developers and engineers, product people, even designers if the team's much larger, and understand any assumptions that may exist. You may even be new to a team, right? So I think it's good to kind of, I think, play that out and understand what people have as an assumption, and that's going to help get a level of understanding and shared understanding, and it just helps you then think around, okay, if we have these assumptions or leaps of faith, then let's start thinking around, okay, if we were to structure that as a hypothesis, what might that start to look like. So if we do this, then this is likely to happen. And I think from that, I think if you've got a clear sense of the experiment and what you expect to see, you should be able to have a clear sense of the behaviors that you would see come through the test. And I think you should kind of commit. You should certainly share that in confidence that you're expecting these types of behaviors to happen, and that will lead to kind of almost like a target that you wish to happen. Then you can start designing the experiment, and I think again, just make sure you're rigorously testing the kind of the experiment to make sure you're always focusing on the right thing. And I think that's just paramount to really anything. Is just focusing on that, on the experiment to begin with, just so you remain focused. And I think some things that kind of can help underpin a kind of a good test are just having some really straightforward good design principles. So making sure that you're clear, things are simple and consistent and easy to follow. I really encourage, I think, people to test variants. It's really easy to commit to one thing and be confident about the first thing, but you never know, right? You just keep
You never
testing
know.
variants. You just never know. I think it's one of those things. If you're continually looking at variants, you're always going to be improving the usability, and you can always make sure you're creating the right experience first time. So yeah, always do variants. And I think it's also powerful as well. You can leverage user testing platforms as a way to kind of benchmark existing experiences as well. So very much like an A/B test, you can have a control of an existing experience, but create the benchmark. But then you can actually measure that against a prototype of a new experience and understand the before and after and the effectiveness of that work. So, I think to kind of see things through more effectively, I think I'd focus on a number of those things to kind of have a solid foundation.
You mentioned something that I would love to highlight and remember also to my experience on different companies. It's like the way that you actually collaborate with other departments and how important is not be designing in isolation and actually just believing on your hypotheses that are the solutions that actually help the world.
Yeah,
It's
it's a
super.
collaborative exercise. It really is. It's a team effort, and I think it's very much part of that. Diverse opinions. As long as everybody can share and feel comfortable sharing those opinions, I think you get a more kind of effective result because everyone's been able to contribute. I think that's important.
I remember working with the sales department specifically.
Yeah,
They have a lot of different requests of how they want to change the designs, and this was a more like a conversation of let's do this variant. And they was happy, the team was happy, everyone is happy because we have something to prove, right? It's
yeah,
not like only I love blue. It's like
yeah.
how actually blue convert with the elements that we have for interactions in the experience, you know? So,
Completely. Yeah.
so yeah, I love to, and I will encourage the audience to work in a collaboration mode with different departments to do better design. And not only the typical departments, as I mentioned, that it could be sales, also different departments as customer service. I remember one time working with customer service, and it was like the implications of our designs in the workflow of them.
It's so important. Yeah. I mean, I think having that feedback loop. No, it doesn't matter whether it be a sales team or whether it be the customer success team. They're all kind of feedback points, and I think that the closer the loop, the better the better result you're going to get. I think.
D- Definitely. I remember,
Yeah.
and I think this is something that I do, but I definitely encourage people to also do it. Like, I am a people person, so I go around the office and I just take my cup of coffee and I start walking through the different departments and talking to people. But
Yeah.
at the same time that I was doing this, I was actually like listen to some of the things that was happening in the company. Like maybe this is not working well. We need to change something on this landing page for this particular client. Okay, so do you have that problem currently? Let me talk about it. Let me see what I can do for you. And every time that I can actually pick it up, different things from different departments, it actually helped me to design better experience for the entire company. So yeah,
Absolutely.
if you are not a
Yeah.
people person and you don't want to actually just work around in the office, you can do it in different ways. You can chat about it and just kind of hang out, you know?
Yeah, they'll find a way. Yeah, I think empathy is a really powerful tool. So it's find your way of communicating and then opening up.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing to have. It's
Yep.
great tool.
Yep. Now I want to ask you, how do you analyze and interpret the result of experience to inform decision making? It's a hard question because sometimes we are really into, okay, I have my designs, now I have my numbers, and that's it. I don't know how I can actually lever this up.
Yeah. I mean, it's really if you have the tools available and you have A/B testing. Um, that's a real good shortcut. I think, you can compare the performance of a variation against the control and great. I think, like I said earlier, if you're able to do some benchmarking in a user testing tool, I think that is a great optimal way of designing before having to build anything. So in any situation, I think try and find a way to leverage that. It's a really powerful thing to do, because then you can effectively communicate how well things have gone, and build the confidence in the teams and throughout the business. But I think other things to kind of really look out for or maybe significant uplifts, within the conversion, that might be indicating that it's working, or even kind of, I think, from diving into whether it's seen it's working, and interpret why might we be seeing specific behavior coming through, and form a level of insight, because that insight could be really powerful, and you could actually start to apply that to different areas of the product. And you may find something might work in the kind of acquisition flow, but there's no reason why it couldn't be used later throughout the experience, or midway through the experience. And I think that's when you're analyzing things, I think you should really also look out for maybe usability issues. Again, you may have been confident with one of the directions, and you may have created a usability issue that you might not have actually foreseen. So I think pay close attention to the feedback that you get. Also, make sure the interaction patterns that you're using are familiar, and not necessarily kind of stretching kind of what people are necessarily used to. It's just a way to give you like a deeper understanding of how different design changes actually do impact the behavior as well. I was even thinking there, just in terms of maybe AI. I think maybe AI kind of plays a bit of a part here. There's a bit of a gap, I think, where in particularly with analyzing and not necessarily the interpreting. I think that you kind of play a part in terms of interpretation for your own user base. But I think AI, I'm quite excited to see AI play a part in this space, actually.
Interesting that you actually mentioned AI. I think AI has a lot to do of how we can summarize important information in a way that is more quickly to inform. Sure. I remember that I mentioned this in another episode of how we can humanize the information and make it more into the user, because the majority of the times when we inform this kind of this kind of content, it's numbers, and we actually working for users that it has been represented by numbers. And sometimes in our minds we lose that. We lose the sense of like we are changing people's life behaviors and the way that they use tools and products. So it's super important to humanize the content. And I think another important thing that I can add, it's not only how we can actually put a face on the percentage and the metrics and the information that we are doing, but also how we can communicate this to higher up and actually show in case that this will be a difference in the way that the company works. I remember one time that changing a design has a lot of impact of how a department actually has an entire workflow, and we actually reduced amount of time of work for that specific design, because it was basically an automation, so the users can contact directly, and it was better for customer service. But the main idea is like, it's not only how we can actually humanize the results or how we can actually condense that results with AI, but also how this actually have a huge role in the way that the company work around, right?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and I think there's big changes happening with AI and customer service tools right now. I think that's all built around efficiencies and, again, optimization. But I think we should never forget that human element. I think as a designer, you play a really, really important role as being, the voice of the customer. And I think that's where I think we really bring a lot to the table. And I think we should never forget that. And, always be active and bringing these conversations to the table, especially when you're overwhelmed with data. You play a really important part. Yeah.
Let's stop the conversation for a moment. Step into the future of UX research with Useberry. From user recordings to click tracking and user flows, our platform offers a variety of insights for better decision making. Elevate your research game with Useberry. Discover more at useberry.com. Follow us on social and drop your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's continue with the show. Now that we have a little bit of more light on how we can communicate things and how important is our percentage, I want to talk about one of the things that I think it's like the challenge of people that are working on testing environments, that is like discussing the importance of continued testing and iteration, maintaining optimal conversion rates, because we are really into these elements. We are testing this amount of variants, but we do maybe 1 round, 2 rounds, and after that, maybe higher ups and stakeholders is like, okay, I have what I have, and
On
I
to the
don't want
next
to know.
thing.
Yeah. Talk about a little bit of that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I mean it's always easy to get caught up and deliver one thing and move on to the next. I think that's just almost an appetite to just do more, deliver more. But I think we really need to pay particular close attention to the what are the outcomes that we're trying to create. And I think by continually testing and iterating is crucial, because user behaviors are always changing, and the landscape's always evolving. And I think by continually testing and I think listening, we can kind of adapt and help refine the things that we're doing, and it helps us kind of stay ahead of the curve. It helps us almost like keep up as well, because I think with the rapid rate of change with AI, it's really important that we do continually test to kind of keep up as well, because it can so easily slip away. But I think we should always be monitoring the work that we may have delivered as well, and actually run surveys or continuously revisit, because that behavior is going to change. But ultimately, it will help us iteratively improve. So the more we iterate, we can create a more seamless experience, and that will drive over time, the kind of conversion rates on an ongoing basis. Just because you fixed it once doesn't mean it's going to need to be optimized again. It certainly will in time. So yeah, always measure after.
I have a colleague, and I would not say his name, but I have a colleague that we do this kind of thing together, that we say the excuses. And every time that we really, really want to test an element, we say, let's begin with excuses. Like the first time I remember, it was like, okay, let's change images for illustration. Okay, that's the excuse. And then it was like, okay, so this element, it will be localized and another experience. So now it's different. Now it's not the same testing. It's because we are doing localization. That is the excuse.
Yeah.
And we trying to make it up. I mean, there are hypotheses, of course, but we are trying to, like, every time be, as you mentioned, like really in advance, be innovative, trying to be better with the conversion optimization rates. So we need an excuse to iterate every time.
It's good. It's a great way to do it, and a great way to kind of make it part of the process. I love it.
Just a tip and trick there, the excuse.
The excuse, something that everybody should adopt.
Yeah. In time-sensitive situations, certain techniques prove more effective than others, such as moderated experimentation. And I know that companies need everything from yesterday. That's one of the things. And companies need numbers right now. And so I want to actually talk about a little bit of the advantage on moderated testing, and how we can actually get rapid feedback to compare to other traditional testing methods.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great topic, and I'm a big advocate for moderated testing. I think it's great to the point where you can get access to participants really quickly as part of a user panel, and I think it's a way to shorten that feedback loop. So ultimately, it's the speed I think you get from being able to do unmoderated testing, and you can iterate quickly. From the test. I also think it's a great way of, if you can run some unmoderated testing, you can easily play back the results, live almost in a matter of hours, and it just builds the confidence surrounding your team, and really helps you engage better with your stakeholders. I think ultimately, again, you've got access to the scale as well, and probably a more diverse kind of participant group as well, that you might not be able to get immediate access to through doing moderated testing, unless you do have a kind of a panel that you've built up over time. I really do believe you got the advantage of scale as well, and I think it's really good to be able to leverage that and kind of quickly test externally, to kind of remove any unbiased kind of any bias, sorry, in feedback that you might have in teams, and kind of remove that confirmation bias overall. So, but I think I wouldn't over-index on just like unmoderated testing is like the go-to. I think it's certainly a balance of both. I think by leveraging unmoderated testing, it allows you to be a bit more pragmatic over when to dive deeper using moderated testing and kind of, leverage that to save time, but also kind of unpick more insight by using a moderated format. I think it just helps you build a bit more empathy for the user at the right moment.
I remember doing unmoderated testing, and as I mentioned before, like we can be in a fight, like, oh my God, I was thinking on this. As you mentioned, the confirmation bias, like we have this idea of how user will use our designs, but when you actually not there, you actually notice what are the things that maybe people has a mental model, or how people really want to navigate or use your product or your service. And this kind of testing, it's super important. As you mentioned, has a balance, right? Because you also need like this kind of interviews that you can actually pick it up the person and you can do follow-up questions and understand other type of motivations. But unmoderated testing has their beautiful insights too.
Yeah, completely. And I think they're both extremely valuable. I think it's just another tool designers can have within their toolkit to be able to, either build confidence quickly in the org, or just kind of, I think being able to kind of pick and choose the right form of testing is just really valuable, I think.
David, I have a question for you. That is a question that the majority of my students actually ask me every time. They are really into testing. They are really trying to start the first project doing an unmoderated testing. But the most hard part for them is actually understand how they can actually put information that provide the user the guidance to do the task that they need to, and how can they actually have, I don't know, a guide of the things that you need to mark and check of this.
Yeah, and it's I think you've always got to be working at, structuring and moderated testing. You might not always get it right first time, and I think again it's continually to refine the tests that you're doing. I think it first starts with kind of screening, and I think making sure that you're focusing on the your user, and is that user your user persona. And it's going to help you get that, almost more meaningful feedback. That's going to be relevant for the business. And I also think you've got to be really clear in your instructions and really being, very step by step, really granular. It's just really, really helpful, because I think if you kind of set up a test and then even play it back and run it yourself, you may catch a few errors in the first pass or second pass, but you're always going to be making it better and better. And I think at the end of that, almost like rigorous testing that you do yourself, you need to make sure that you've got a clear action that you have to take within the test, and you've got to be careful that that's not leading in any way. But I think you can also kind of follow up with also surveys to try and dive a bit deeper. If you didn't necessarily get a level of insight that you felt, and then maybe there were some areas that came out of the test that you needed to dive a bit more into. And I think that's kind of really, really important. And I think, again, through testing regularly yourself, you're just making sure it's easy to read and it's kind of intuitive. So I think, I think these things kind of help you facilitate the test, which can kind of hopefully open the door to get more open feedback, I'd say.
Definitely. I always trying to also add to them, like, think about this as a resume. When you are writing a resume, you need action words in the bullet points that you explaining your education or your past experience. So when you are actually creating a unmoderated test, and you want to give instructions, start with actions. What kind of actions or interactions do you want the user do, right? So it's
100%.
it's more directional the way that you actually creating the entire, because that's another thing I always mention. You are creating an experience of testing for the user experience that you want trying to try.
Completely. I think another thing is I think, base it on, real scenarios and try and reflect the real experience. So if you're going to structure the test, take a real task specific approach. Just really helps you get a better result, I think, a more focused result.
I have a question, and it's more related to the topics that I love, that is diversity, equity, inclusion. And we talk
Mm.
a little bit about the bias confirmation, right? But how you actually can mitigate the risk of bias when designing experience and ensure fair and unbiased outcomes, because that's super hard.
I mean, it is, yeah. And I think it really, I think you've got to learn more about yourself, and you've got to be really self-aware. And I think that takes practice and time. Um, and I think always, with the environment, sometimes it's easy to fall into like a subjective, state of mind when things aren't maybe going to plan. So the bias can always creep in. And I think you've got to avoid letting your own assumptions become that influencing factor. So minimize, that leading language that might be kind of creeping in, kind of step back and really reframe questions in the right way. I think again, kind of going into the screening of participants is really important. Make sure that you're focusing on the right demographics, and if you're unable to remove your bias, get some help. Ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help to kind of rewrite your questions or reframe them in a way that that removes the bias. And I think that's really important to try and mitigate any form of bias that might creep in the first time. I think you'll be more aware of it the second time. I think there's other things that you can try to do as well, rather than just maybe setting up the tests and reframing questions. You can try and randomize the order of kind of maybe tasks that you've had within tests. You can try using different mixed methods. So, from kind of like talk out loud studies, and mixing that with a structured survey, you're going to be able to get a mix of qualitative and quantitative feedback. And I think that's going to be a real great way to kind of like balance the bias and removing it. And I think always be aware that when we're running these tests, it's always going to be, maybe it's not going to be perfect, and there's always room for improvement. And I think that's when you get the opportunity to continuously kind of improve the way you're running tests and improve how you're all working together as a team, and even how you're playing back the work that you're doing as a team, and everybody plays a part to try and remove bias. So I think it's just trying to make things fair, and as unbiased as possible. And I think by doing that as a team, you can get more open feedback, and it's hopefully going to reflect more accurate insights, I think, through the tests that you do as a team.
I love that you mentioned if you have a bias, ask for help. That's one of the hardest thing
Very, yeah, very much so, yeah.
in terms of identification. Like, oh my God, I have this bias. How I can work around this? And I think this is another hard thing, but I want to mention because I think it's super super important. Like representation, and there is not a lot of companies that are actually doing this well, but that's why it's so important to mention. And when you
Yeah.
have a diverse group or team in your company, you have the opportunity of, before you actually launch in a test, get around on the team and actually, let's say, for example, and this happens to me in a couple of companies, I start actually creating a test and I have my own biases, but when I actually share this test with another colleague before we share this to the public, they say like, hey, wait a minute, do you think about this and this and this? Because he is aware of different things that for me are normal, but actually are
Completely.
biased. And
Yeah.
that's why representation it's so, so important. And actually collaboration with different mindsets, different intersectionalities, and actually different kind of opinions.
Yeah, 100%. I think you, and also kind of dialing into cultural differences as well. I think that's why it's really, really important to, I think, play out a test within the safety of your own team before you maybe want to kind of go a bit more public with that. But I think you just need to step back and realize it's more input. It's also feedback. Don't take things personally. It's the result is going to be much more profound than where you started, and it's always going to inch you much closer to a better test in the end. I think being open is a very, very tricky place to get to, but I think it's actively encouraged. And I think even if it's a matter of not asking for help, or maybe it's just asking for what do you think, get an opinion, and a second opinion is always worth $1 million.
Reach out, designers. Don't work alone. I think that's the
Yeah.
summary of this episode.
break the silo.
Yep. So, David, we are almost final this amazing interview, and thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. Before we go, any tip and trick that you want that the audience have below their notebooks?
Yeah, I would. I think because we've been focusing on kind of conversion optimization, I think really don't forget about empathy. It plays such an important role in everybody's work in all aspects. I think so. Put yourself in the shoes of the users and empathize with the experiences that they go through. It's going to help you uncover so much insight, and also really help you differentiate the kind of the product that you're working on. So if you're designing experiments or even making business decisions, always prioritize empathy and find a way to include it.
And also, people, every element is worth to test.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's always an excuse.
There's always an excuse, exactly. David, thank you so much for being here in If You Sick. I've been having a great time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with the audience.
No, thank you very much. I'm glad my voice didn't break.
We survived the interview.
Thank you
Well,
so
everyone,
much.
thank you so much, and we'll be to the next episode of If You Sick. Thank you for joining us on If You Sick. For more exciting content, follow us on our social channels. Your review means the world to us, so don't forget to leave one. And of course, hit that subscribe button on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify to stay updated on our latest episodes. If You Seek, it's a platform for discussions and personal insights. The opinions presented by guests are independent and do not represent the official position of the host, Useberry, or our sponsors. See you on the next episode of If You Sick.